Wendy?
Yeah, I was hoping that was true, as Nick said, that there's certainly a political imperative and desire to facilitate the transition between academia and government. And again, Nick mentioned, of course, there has been greater emphasis on providing more support and a proper framework for early career researchers. But of course, the test is whether you're noticing it, if you're feeling that those opportunities are there and that support is there. So it's kind of throwing the question back to you. And again, to sound as though I'm obsessed with UCL again, but I think because my former chair was the Vice-Chancellor of UCL, so I probably get more of the examples from him. But one thing UCL are very good at is that they're trying to embed an entrepreneurial attitude it's prompted by something Avril said, in both their undergrads and postgraduates, to equip them more with the skills of setting up their own companies and being more independent-minded and being innovative. It's actually, I must go along to some of the sessions. How they actually do that, I don't know. It must be very difficult. I don't know how you do instill entrepreneurialism. I'm sure it's all very ingenious. But yes, it's partly throwing it back to you and partly making a comment about where I see some improvements.
The thing that I worry a little bit about on this subject, and I think it's fine that we encourage people, undergraduate and postgraduate level, to be entrepreneurial, to set up, but we've heard, I think, throughout the day that the rate of failure of companies that are technology-based and start with very little capital is very high, and we have to make sure that there are systems in place that if people do fail, I don't mean fail in a personal sense, but if their business venture fails, it isn't a catastrophic event at a psychological level, and there are ways in which they can systematically learn from it and recover and then start over again. We do have a culture, certainly in our bureaucracy, that regards failure as death, and one can only really, bank on winners. And I think there is work to be done still, in addition to encouraging people to be entrepreneurial, to make sure that when some of them don't make it work for absolutely no fault of their own, it isn't too devastating a prospect.
I'm assuming that's part of the training, actually, that understanding that you are likely to fail, but precisely as you're saying, seeing that as a learning experience and not as a devastating one.
And it needs resources to back that up when you've gone bankrupt, as it were. Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Funding to fail.
Yes, at the back. Sorry, it was difficult to see people.
Yes. Imran Marx from the Royal Academy of Engineering. I'm obviously delighted about the National HE STEM program, considering that 14.5% of engineering undergraduate are female. And I do agree that there are good practices both in the UK and in Europe. And considering that Europe, they are aiming at 40% female representation at a boardroom level, I have checked the European Research Council's grants, and I have noticed that their female representation is 15 to 25%. And I do know that here at the Royal Academy of Engineering, we have a higher representation of females, so there is quite a lot of positive practice in the UK as well. That's my first point. Second point is that in the UK, we have a large number of positive initiatives aiming at increasing the representation of women at undergraduate or graduate level or in industry. However, where does the National HE STEM program fit in exactly? What is the difference that this program does compared, for example, to the Women into Science and Engineering program that existed, which was chaired by Baroness Platt? And also, for example, Women's Engineering Society has student groups in various universities across the UK trying to encourage and support females at undergraduate level and postgraduate level. So where exactly do you fit in? And what have you learned so far from the universities taking part? And what plans do you have to enlarge this program? Because I understand that there are very few universities taking part in it.
Okay.
Several questions.
From the beginning. Right. it fits in by underpinning or supporting everything that's already going on. But more importantly, there have been so many things going on in isolation around the country so far. What this programme seeks to do is highlight all those elements of good practice that currently exist, having been developed and obviously through pilot studies learnt, all the best practices now learnt about in those areas, and then ensure that it's disseminated across to those universities and departments where currently practice is less good. Because you'll have to admit, although you will probably know of many areas where there is very good practice in encouraging women into science, there are equally little deserts where it is less well established that even the practice needs to be adapted, never mind whether it's actually in place. So our job is very much to make sure that that which is going on, which is good, is known about. You talk about plans to enlarge. The plan is that every university within the UK that is offering STEM subjects will be part of this. But STEM is very specifically defined as physics, chemistry, engineering and maths, not the full range of STEM that is frequently commented upon. The programme itself is still very young. That's why you haven't heard of it. However, you will very soon. And the intention is very much to set up not only networks and workshops so that people know about the practice that they could well be adopting, but also repositories of information, guidelines. This would be on a website. So hopefully we will see good practice spreading. And what we're really hoping is that those places that have yet to see the light, as I would put it, begin to realise that they are then at a disadvantage. And we're not just looking at encouraging kids into science, we're looking at the whole process of recruitment, and we're looking at the whole process of ensuring that they are supported through their undergraduate careers, both in terms of the success technically, but also in terms of employability skills. So they are fully prepared for whatever ambitions they have beyond their undergraduate careers. However, if you have particular ideas, do contact me, because I'm open to all sorts of suggestions.
Okay. Yes, gentleman here at the end of the row.
My understanding is that, and please correct me, is that about 20 years ago, the intake of undergraduates to university consisted of about 25% in science subjects, and that has now fallen to about 13%. Would you care to comment on this and whether anything needs to be done about it?
Who'd like to take that?
It's less that the proportion has fallen, it's more that the proportion of non-science has risen. As I understand it, and my particular area is physics, the number of graduate physicists has remained pretty static over 20 years. But the interest amongst those people now coming into university who previously would not have considered university is much more in the non-science subjects. And so what has happened is there's been a huge growth in the less strategically important subjects, as I would put them, and very little change elsewhere. And that's why I refer back to my previous comment that if the growth has been in those areas that are not defined as strategically important, can the cuts not revert them back to where they were before and leave us alone?